general principles of contract. The last class, much elaborate discussion was made by me in the context of the introduction, the definitional aspects, offer acceptance, then proposal, communication of an offer, revocation, etc. Now, don't want to waste much time on all these things. The video has already been circulated to you. If at all you have any doubts or discussions that can be held at the tag end of the session, as such, you can just make use and benefit out of the video, whatever is circulated to you. Now, directly getting into, if you may have a BAR Act in your hand, you can just make use of your BAR Act. Now, getting into the very, very important aspect of the parties to a contract, or I can say the parties who are all competent to enter into a contract. Section 11. So section 10, before that, is one single understanding, single line understanding, I can just tell you. Now, section 10 talks about the concept of what agreements are contract. This is section 10 scope. So, all agreements are contract. All contract are agreements. Whether all agreements are contracts or all contracts are rather agreements. Right? In the Mariana questions, now you can refer straight away to the provision under section 10. Section 10 says all agreements are contract in nature. So all contracts are not agreement. All agreement contract so that is why at very beginning I was just making a precise formula as such, which we have to keep in mind. C is equal to OA C to the power of 3 L OA C cube L அப்படிங்கற ஒரு ஃபார்முலா சொன்னேன். அது அப்படியே இங்க திருப்பி வரும் section 10 பாத்தீங்கன்னா. Now all agreements are said to be contract if at all they are made by free consent of the parties. அந்த C ல இதுவும் ஒன்னு. And parties who are all competent to contract, competency or capacity of parties, which we will be discussing under section 11. And then for a lawful consideration, or C, மொத்தம் 3 C முடிஞ்சு போச்சு. Then for a lawful object, right? அப்புறம் offer acceptance as usual முன்னாடி. அப்போ all agreements are held to be contracts if at all they are made with a free consent. ஏன்னா consentங்கற மட்டும் முக்கியம் கிடையாது. Free consent பார்க்கணும், that we will be discussing once again in the terms of section 14. Right? 13 ல consent, 14 ல free consent, that we will discuss. So all those agreements which is to be executed for the purpose of a lawful object, only for a lawful object a contract could be executed. So this, you know, the very intention of the parties to a contract to create a legal obligation, right? Lawful object, that's the thing. So now it also says that what is the effect of a contract in force, which is so being expressly entered between parties, whether does it requires a registration of such a contract, and all those things are there. Now taking a step further, getting into the very particular aspect under section 11. Now who are all the parties competent to make contract? So we can put it in other ways, capacity of the parties. So யாரெல்லாம் ஒப்பந்தத்தை நுழைவதற்கான தகுதி கொண்ட நபர்கள், right? So the party, every person is competent to contract. It starts with a very general understanding or generalized statement. So every person is competent to contract அப்படினா, now the parties who are all being so declared under section 11, அவ்வளவுதான். அதுல சில disqualifications, incompetency கொடுக்கறாங்க. So section 11 not only talks about the competency of the parties, rather it also talks about the incompetent persons who are disqualified by law from being entered into a legal contract. So what is the disqualification? Now it says the party is competent to contract, namely a person must be attained the age of majority as per the Majority Act. Right? India பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் Indian Majority Act is the governing provision. 1875 ல வந்தது. So section 3 of Indian Majority Act spells out the terms of attaining majority, the age, etc., etc. Now a person who is major is qualified perfectly to enter into a contract. Now even otherwise, it also spells the disqualification, as I said. Now certain categories of persons are listed out under section 11. Number 1, it talks about the incompetency, the person who is so incompetent under law, section 11, minor is incompetent to enter into a contract. Minor's contract is per se void ab initio, right from the beginning. This word is very, very particular. So, if a minor is incompetent, the famous leading case law is Mohri Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghosh. In this, take into consideration, which we will just discuss. So, the first class of person who are disqualified or disentitled, legally incompetent is minor. Now, coming to next, the persons who are of an unsound mind, இது நெகட்டிவ்ல சொல்றது. அப்ப என்ன கான்ட்ராக்ட்ல என்டர் ஆகணும் அப்படின்னா person should be of a sound mind. அப்போ only the person having attained age of majority and who is of possessing a sound mind is qualified to be entered into a contract. Now the last one, general disqualification. The person should not have been disqualified subject to any other law, which is so being the governing law for them. வேற எந்த சட்டத்தினாலையும் அவர்களை தகுதியின்மை ஒப்பந்தத்தில் நுழைவதற்கு தகுதியின்மையாக செஞ்சிடக்கூடாது. அப்படின்னு என்ன, சப்ஜெக்ட் டு பி இன்சால்வன்ட் அந்த மாதிரி. ரைட். So all these things are the subject matter insofar as the competency of the parties to a contract is concerned. So age of majority என்னங்கிறது தெரியும். நம்ம இந்தியாவை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் generally 18 years, right? So whether minor's contract is valid or not. No, minor cannot per se individually enter into a contract, but rather a minor could be represented or a person appointed to be a guardian in the case of a representative capacity, natural guardian or court appointed, whatever be the. So you can just refer to Indian Majority Act for the purpose of computing the age criteria. Right. Now coming to the next aspect, namely the leading case law I have just told, Mohri Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghosh. Right. The citation is I'll give you the citation. Yes, 1902. It is a Privy Council judgment, a well-known judgment, landmark case. 1902. Indian Law Reporter, page number 30, Calcutta 539. Right. Just make note of this case. Very, very important case. So what is that? It is provided under this Mohri Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghosh is that now looking at section 11 of Indian Contract Act. So the contracting parties must essentially make out their valid competency to enter into a contract. அப்போ தகுதி படித்தவர்களாக சட்டத்தின் கீழ் யாரெல்லாம் வரையறுக்கப்பட்டிருக்கிறார்களோ அவர்கள் மாத்திரம்தான் ஒரு ஒப்பந்தத்தில் பங்கு பெறுவதற்கு தகுதி உடையவர்கள். என்ன, சட்ட தகுதி உடையவர்கள். அப்போ சட்டத்துல வந்து டிஸ்குவாலிஃபை பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. அப்போ மைனர் cannot per se enter into a contract அப்படின்னா minor is so being incompetent or he is so being disqualified by law to enter into a contract. So once a minor is entering into a contract and later point of time he is now getting into the terms of advantages of the contractual obligations, he cannot claim is as a matter of fact or right. அப்படின்னா என்ன, மைனர் கான்ட்ராக்ட்ல நுழையக்கூடாது அப்படின்னு சொன்னதுனால மைனர் ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்ட்ல என்டர் ஆயிட்டு பின்னால வந்து he cannot claim it as a matter of right, saying that he is qualified to enter into a contract, right? So he cannot, a child or a minor for that matter is not having that legal standing in the eye of law under section 11. This is very, very important aspect. So you are stopped or you are being stopped from entering into a contract. But at a later point of time, you cannot come before a court of law and say that I do not know the consequences of such a contract, so I have entered into a contract. Now that kind of a premise, you cannot rise it at a later point of time. This is the effect of a minor's contract as such. Only on your date of being attaining majority, you are being qualified to make yourself enter into a contract by your legal capacity. இது வந்து ஏஜ் வச்சு மைனாரிட்டி வச்சு டிசைட் பண்ணக்கூடிய வேலை. Now there is yet another concept which is particularly in the name of beneficial contracts. Mohri Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghoshல சொன்னது அதுதான். மைனரோட பெனிஃபிட்டுக்காக whether guardian could be permitted to enter into a contract. Once again, the proposition of law is that because we say very clearly minor is incompetent to enter into a contract. So if a minor is directly entering into a contract, it is void ab initio. It is very, very clear. Now, accordingly, if that contractual obligation is to be enforced or allowed to be performed by a legal representative or a legal guardian for or on behalf of the benefit of the minor's interest or the estate of the minor? Is it having some bearing or an obligation that is so been vested upon law? See, I am not entering directly, but I am being represented in a representative capacity by somebody in the name of a guardian. So whether that kind of a contract is said to be a contract per se, or is it also be declared to be a void ab initio contract? So those contracts are not declared to be void ab initio because they are categorized within the compartment of the beneficial contracts. That's Mohri Bibi versus Dharmadas Postla. So that is, it says that when a minor is directly entering into a contract, it is void ab initio absolutely, but it has got some kind of access, a limited access. What is that access? If it is so been represented by the estate of minor is so been represented by a guardian, it doesn't have an embargo, right? So beneficial nature of contracts, it is to be taken into consideration for the benefit of the minor, right? This is the position of law. Now, the yet another disqualification which we discuss is persons of unsound mind. This is particularly discussed in the ambit of section 12. It talks about not rather unsoundness of mind, it talks about what is a sound mind, right? So to determine the particular factum that a person is of a sound mind. What is the criteria that is so been fixed under law as part of section 12? Now, when you read the provision verbatim, it says a person of a sound mind for purpose of making any contract at the time when the contract is being enforced or executed, he must be capable of understanding. What is understanding? That does not been expressly stated, but it is being covered under the very same provision, the limb of section 12. It covers one particular thing. In the capability or the capacity to understand. What is that capacity? Such a capacity is to, in such a way, he must be in a position to form an understanding of the rational thinking, the cause and effect. He must be having the rationality in his mind. He must know the effect or the cause of the transaction that is so being entered by him. Apo, he must be in having a man of a rational thinking. Apo பகுத்தறிவு உள்ள ஒரு மனிதன். அப்போ பகுத்தறிந்து பார்த்து ஆராயக்கூடிய வகையில் அதனுடைய நன்மை தீமைகள் விளைவுகள் என்னங்கிறத தெரிஞ்சுக்கக்கூடியதை ஃபீல் பண்றவன் தான் sound minded person சொல்லிடுறோம். So he is only hailed to be a sound mind person in the context of section 12 of the Contract Act, right? So இதுல ஒரு ரெண்டு மூணு criteria வரும். Lunatics, right? A person who is of a lunatic. அதுல அடுத்தது a person who is usually a sound minded person, right, or occasionally he turned to be unsounded. இப்படி கூட வச்சுக்கலாம். A person who is usually unsounded mind, but at times occasionally he turned to be sound. அமாவாசை வந்துனா பைத்தியம் வந்துரும், பௌர்ணமி வந்துச்சுன்னா பைத்தியம் தெளிஞ்சிரும், right? I'm just putting it very casually, right? அப்படின்னா என்ன? At frequent intervals a person who may be of an unsounded mind also turn out to be a person of a sound mind nature. அப்ப unsounded-ஆவே இருந்தாலும் கூட occasionally he turn out to be a sound minded person. அப்படின்னா whether he is having the capacity in law under section 12 to make a contract, yes, it says affirmative. எப்போ? At times when he is occasionally of a sound minded. அப்போ எப்போ வந்து sound mindedness அவனுக்கு இருக்குங்கிறத affirm பண்ணிக்கிறோமோ, at that particular point of time he is capable of entering into a contract. சரி, அப்போ unsoundedness-க்கு திருப்பி போயிடுறான், sound mind இல்ல, திருப்பி after 15 days or 1 month he turned to be unsounded. Whether he could be able to ratify or he could be able to make out a contract during his time of unsoundedness, no, right? So அப்ப எப்ப சவுண்ட் இயல்பு நிலைக்கு திரும்பி வர்றானோ அப்ப கான்ட்ராக்ட் போடலாம், அப்ப கான்ட்ராக்ட்ல என்டர் ஆகிக்க முடியும். But occasionally if turned out to be unsounded during such period of unsoundness mind, he is not or he may not be in a position to make out a contract, right? So this is one particular thing. Adan a person who is at a frequent intervals, or we can say for example a lunatic asylum la irukka or person, adan sonnen a lunatic, the best example. During such period of treatment he may get out of his illness whatever he is prone to. His mental illness is just now been get rid of. Immediately after he is back to normalcy, in a frequent interval. Say for example, some 1 week or 10 days he is normally quite right, very particularly comfortable with a sound in a sound state. Now he may contract or he may enter and execute a contract during such a interval. There is no embargo for him to enter into a contract during that lucid interval of time with which he is of a stable or a sound mind. அப்ப திருப்பியும் வந்து unsoundness மைண்டுக்கு போயிடுறான், right? He is going back to unsound mind அப்படின்னா that point of time he cannot or he could not be in a position to enter into a contract. So frequent intervals க்கு இது ஒரு, this is the example under section 12, right? Now coming to the next important provision, if you may just look into the yet another C in OACQBL, consent. This is very, very important. It defines very simpliciter. Section 13 talks about consent. Oppudal or assent, we can say. It simpliciter says when two or more persons are said to be agreeing upon a same thing in the same sense. The emphasis must be thrusted here into a legal maxim. Consensus ad idem. This is the maxim which is governing section 13. Now what I was just telling, two or more persons, they are capable of entering into a contract by giving a consent when they are agreeing upon the same thing in the same sense. So if I say I am agreeing for something in the same context, my counterpart, say I am the offerer, I am offering something in a particular context, my offeree should also be in a position to accept that in the very same sense. Say I am ready to offer my car, my offeree should also be in a position to accept the car, which is the subject matter of the contract. But rather, if he is not taking in the same sense, if he is otherwise saying instead of car, he is asking for a bike, right? Whatever I am giving as offer is only the car, but he is not understanding it in that particular sense. He is asking it in some other sense, asking me to deliver or to enter into a contract in terms of it relates to my bike. So it is not a same thing, or it is not in the consensus ad idem, meeting of minds of both the parties. So meeting of minds na rendu per poi நேருக்கு நேர் சந்திச்சுக்கிறதுன்னு இல்ல, என்ன நிலைமையில என்ன ஒரு ஒருமித்தமான ஒரு விஷயத்துக்கு நான் வந்து முன்வைக்கிறேனோ அதே விஷயத்தை அதே வாக்கில் அதே நோக்கத்தோட my counterpart should also be there to receive the receiving end. அதான், so persons meeting together and agreeing upon to enter into a same thing in the same context, in the same manner, in the same sense. இதெல்லாம் முக்கியம். So now consent அப்படின்னா இதெல்லாம் consensus ad idemங்கிறதுக்குள்ள வருது. அப்ப எப்ப ஃப்ரீ கன்சென்ட்ங்கிறது உருவாகிறது? ஃப்ரீ அப்படின்னா இட் இஸ் நாட் தட் அவுட் ஆஃப் எந்த கன்சிடரேஷன் இல்லாம அப்படி இல்ல. விஷியேட்டிங் ஃபேக்டர் வெரி வெரி இம்பார்ட்டன்ட். வாட் இஸ் தட் விச் ஷுட் நாட் பி விஷியேட்டட்? இப்போ ஒரு கன்சென்ட் வாங்குறதுல பின்வரக்கூடிய காரணங்கள் ஏதாவது இருந்து அதன் மூலமாக அந்த கான்ட்ராக்ட்ல கன்சென்ட் வாங்கினதே டோட்டலா இன்வாலிடேட் ஆயிருது, விஷியேட் ஆகுது அப்படின்னா தட் ஆஸ்பெக்ட் இஸ் நாட் செட் டு பி a free consent. அப்படின்னா என்ன? Now consent is said to be free or it is said to be finest in a pure form only if it has not been clothed with or it has not been cast out of, or such a consent has been given by one party is not out of these following vitiating elements or vitiating factors of the contract. What are the vitiating factors? Now we start with section 15 onwards, we will end up to section 22, right? Consent is said to be free or free consent if it is not made out of coercion, first one, as defined under section 15. அப்படியே வரிசையா ஒண்ணா வரும். Next 16. If it is not out of undue influence, a person using the dominant position and by virtue of his dominant position he is putting under pressure the other person to yield to his dominancy, that is undue influence. Now the next one, if it is not out of fraud, section 17. If it is not out of misrepresentation, 18. Once again, not subjected to mistake. Here mistake is being categorized under section 20, 21 and 22. Mistake of law and mistake of fact, which we will be discussing. So these are all the vitiating factors. So once you say it is vitiated, அப்போ இந்த மாதிரியான காரணிகளால் ஏதாவது ஒரு ஒப்பந்தம் நிகழ்த்தப்பட்டிருக்குமாயின் பின்னாளில் when at the option of either party, any one party objecting to it and coming before the court of law, raising these allegations or raising these vitiating factors, making it very clear, another voidable at the instance of a party who has made the contract. It is not void per se, it is not void ab initio. If a contract is so being made out of, if it is made with coercion or undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, etc., etc. Now that is not as like that of minor's contract. We cannot hail it to be void ab initio. அது எடுத்த உடனே void ab initio னு சொல்ல முடியாது. When it becomes void அப்படினா, it is not void, it is voidable when it is being raised or thrown before as an allegation before a court of law, giving to understand that this contract was executed by making me putting under some kind of a vitiating factors. That vitiating factor at the later point of time in future day, when one party is coming before a court and he is placing before the material factors, right, saying that these are all the constituent elements that the contract would be per se hailed to be void, or I am now making it as a voidable because I myself is the person who is aggrieved against these vitiating factors, raising the cause of action before the court of law. I have to make it allegate all these vitiating factors to make the contract void. So it is at my instance, it is at my option. Now the option is so being exercised by me. So that is why it is hailed to be voidable. It is not per se termed to be void ab initio. Rather, it is called to be voidable because I myself is coming before a court. I rather take that cause of action as a vitiating factor to hail it or to hail that particular act as a voidable one, right? So now coming to what are all the methods or what are all the factors that is so been given under section 15 of the Contract Act to term it as coercion, right? Coercion abdina simple an act of intimidation or act of threat. Achurthudal, coerce, you are forcing rather a person, right? So that is so been forbidden by law. Which law forbids? No, any law for that matter. Now whatever we say, if it is so been act being punishable with IPC or it is so been punishable under any other penal laws, etc., etc., right? So if you are unlawfully or illegally threatening some person to commit some act under the guise of entering into a contract so as to have an intention to make that person to enter into such an agreement, right? So what is very material here is whether or not the law is forbidding or law is punishing that act or not. IPC la punishment threat பண்ணதுக்கு இன்டிமிடேஷனுக்கு கிரிமினல் இன்டிமிடேஷனுக்கோ மத்ததுக்கோ பனிஷ்மென்ட் பண்ணிருக்கணும்னு அவசியம் கிடையாது. Whether or not that fact is to be that particular act is termed as a criminal in nature, but what is that to be proved is that this contract is not entered or executed between the offerer and offeree with clean hands. Rather, a party is so being threatened or he is subjected to some kind of an coercion by force or by pressurizing him, making him to get prejudice of that particular act and performance of a contract. அப்போ ஒருத்தரை வந்து force பண்ணியோ அல்லது if you are making him to threat or you are giving a color of some kind of unlawfully detaining a person with an intention to threat such a person, right? யாரோ ஒருத்தரை கூட்டிட்டு போய் கட்டி வச்சு மிரட்டி கையெழுத்து போடு கான்ட்ராக்ட்லன்னு சொல்லி you are executing a contract. Now at a later point of time that person comes before the court of law and says, now so as to enter into a contract I was subjected to this kind of a threatening or coercive act on the part of the offerer, right? So this was beautifully held in a case of our Honorable Madras High Court in Sikkim Ammiraju versus Sikkim Seshamma. This is very, very landmark or a leading case law, right? Sikkim Ammiraju versus Sikkim Seshamma, Indian Law Report 1918 41 Madras, right? So this is a pre-constitutional or rather it is during the British times. What is the fact is that now a person with under the guise of committing threat of suicide, right, he induced his wife and his son to execute a document, namely a release deed in favor of his brother in respect of certain properties, right, which claim to be the properties of the person. Now You are threatening somebody. What is the threat? How you are going to induce such person? Right. If not, these people are coming voluntarily out of their own volition to execute a document in his favor, he will commit suicide. So the threat is now amounting, whether amounts to coercion or not, within the section of 15, or rather very particularly in terms of the vitiating factors of coercion, right? So what is your intention? Your intention is to execute, make the persons, your wife and son, to execute a release deed. If not, the persons are coming forward under their own volition, you are forcing them by way of a threat which is so been attached in a way of coercive act, that if not this is going to happen, you are now then forcing them to make it happen by way of putting a pressure on them unnecessarily, right? So an attempt by making them to informing them that you will be committing suicide, it is, once again, it is a punishable offense. To attempt to commit suicide, it is a punishable offense, right? So there is a, you cannot say that it is not being punishable, right? So if it is so being forbidden by law, your act is being termed to be a coercive act. So சட்டத்தால வந்து அது ஒரு குற்றமாக பார்த்திருக்கணும், that is being prohibited under law, then that act is being held to be a coercive act, right? This is one particular aspect of coercion. Now yet another vitiating factor under section 16, undue influence. So influencing one person is something that by virtue of holding a dominant position as a superior position, you are unduly influencing a person. That is something different. என்ன இருக்கணும் undue influence அப்படினா, there must be a subsisting dominant relationship or a predominant relation between the parties to a contract. One party must be in a predominant position to dominate over the will of the other party. What is that? Section 16 categorizes. Now the relation must be in a dominant relationship. Master servant, teacher and a student, employer and employee. What is the dominancy over here? You are predominantly using your position to dominate the will or wish or desire of somebody else. Say, I am the master, right? I am saying, if you are not doing so, then you will be taken up to task. You are after all my servant, right? So do what I say. So now I am in a position to dictate or command, right? So in particular, I am going to cause prejudice to a person who is so been subjecting himself to a more and more subjective dominant position. I am the person who is in principle a dominant person. By virtue of that, now I am foregoing my, or rather I am putting it into a deemed position of privilege, which is making other person to turn out to be in otherwise. அப்ப என்ன, ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்ட்ல நார்மலான மென்டல் கெப்பாசிட்டியோடவோ இல்ல நார்மலான மனநிலையோடயோ அவன் வந்து அதை என்டர் ஆக மாட்டான். நான் அவனை அன்டியூவா இன்ஃப்ளூயன்ஸ் பண்ற காரணத்தினால, because I am dominating the will of such a person to enter into a contract with me, now such a whole transactions appears to be, what is that? Prima facie, it is so been evidenced. If it is consciously looked upon, if I would not have forced him or unduly influenced him by virtue of my dominant position, he would not have come forward having the contract executed in the favor. அப்ப எதை prove பண்ணணும்? Once again, it is a voidable nature. Now at the later point of time, if the person who is put under a pressure or unduly influenced by the will of subjugating the will of the other person, he must come before the court and prove only one thing. What is that? I am in a position to persuade him to dominate predominantly his will. அவனுடைய விருப்பத்திற்கு மாறாக நான் அவனை அன்டியூவா இன்டியூஸ் பண்ணிட்டேன், இன்ஃப்ளூயன்ஸ் பண்ணிட்டேங்கிறத ப்ரூவ் பண்ணணும். This is the very significant part which you have to, or rather the ability to dominate the will of the other person must be in a more convincing nature. அப்ப யாரெல்லாம் பண்ண முடியும்? Who is having the ability per se to dominate the will of the other person? Normally, as I was just pointing out, there are certain relationships. What is the relationship? Master servant, employer employee, teacher student, right? Once again, father son, husband wife, these are all certain relationships which could easily dominate the will of other person over the a party to a contract. So this is undue influence, right? Or you can say person must be holding some kind of a fiduciary relationship, right? So person must be having some apparent authority or real authority on him, must be holding a fiduciary relationship. இதெல்லாம் தான் இப்போ fiduciary relationship நான் சொல்லிட்டு இருக்கேன். So this must be proved. அப்ப burden of proof இப்ப எப்படி வருது? இந்த ரிலேஷன்ஷிப்ல இவங்க இருந்தாங்க, because since he is a master of me, he has now influenced me unduly by virtue of that fiduciary relationship. He forced me to enter into the contract. That must be the proving factor. The factum to prove is that fiduciary relationship or a beneficial advantage that have to be taken into consideration, right? So this is what where undue influence so been categorized under section 16 of the Contract Act is concerned. Now coming to the yet another aspect under section 17, very particular, fraud. Once again, a fraudulent act, a person attributing fraudulent behavior or a fraudulent means with somebody else. Now what is that fraud? It is nothing but now a person who is in a position to make other party to believe as if this is a bona fide one. Now fraudulent அப்படினா என்ன? Now it is nothing but a person must be including a person who is now committing an act of fraudulent way. நம்பகத்தன்மையை ஒருத்தனை நம்பிக்கை செய்ய வச்சு, in connivance of committing a fraudulent act, he is putting some kind of a fact before a person which is otherwise not true. உண்மையாக இல்லாத ஒண்ணா இருக்கிறதா நம்ப வைக்கணும், அதுதான். So whatever is not believed to be true or whatever is not really exist in a persisting contractual relationship with true, right? It is otherwise believed, made by a person to believe it to be true. Eppadi? Now there must be three factors. First one, while making a person to believe something, you must have hide or concealed something. A material fact is so been concealed by you. Say for example, something you are entering into a contract. Now you say, this is a this particular goods or whatever you are now coming forward in terms of contract, execution of contract. This is a valid or a worthable material. இது நல்ல ஒரு தரமான ஒரு பொருள்னு சொல்லி நம்ப வச்சு, you are making that person to believe by every reason of it, but you are concealing a material fact. What is the material fact concealed? That is a goods of a substandard quality அப்படின்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க. On an initial point of time, the person entering into the contract, the offeree, doesn't know that this is of a substandard nature of a goods. Only after entering into a contract, after the contract is concluded, he came to know that by virtue of making him to believe, that every reason to believe that it is a valid or a worthy quality goods. Now you have made him to totally concealed an active fact. What is an active fact that is concealed? The goods of a substandard quality is now here concealed. அப்போ ஒரு விஷயத்தை இருக்கிறதா சொல்லி நம்ப வச்சு உண்மையை மறைத்து உண்மை நிலைக்கு மாறாக you are promising, making a person to believe or with an intention to deceive somebody. So the concept of cheating or penal law சொல்லணும் அப்படின்னா cheating, right, in terms of section offense punishable under section 420, right, cheating. அப்ப இந்த இடத்துல என்ன சொல்றோம்? In terms of civil jurisprudence, the intention to deceive somebody or an act which is so been specifically termed to be a fraudulent act, right? So a person, if he is not speaking out, if he is not concealing the material fact that this particular act involves a concealment of a particular fact which is otherwise held to be fraudulent one. அப்போ உண்மை நிலையை சொல்லாம மறைச்சு அதை நம்ப வச்சு if you are doing something, then it is subject to be voidable. எப்போ? when the other party comes to know that this is done or it is executed in pursuance of a fraudulent nature. What is the fraudulent nature? Concealment of the material fact as such, right? அப்போ ஒரு material fact மறைத்து ஒரு விஷயத்தை செய்யறோம் அப்படின்னா then it is held to be once again a fraudulent act. சரி. Now coming to the next concept as such under misrepresentation. So இது எல்லாமே voidable. நம்ம பார்த்தது எல்லாமே voidable at a instance of the party. Now what is misrepresentation அப்படின்னா you are making a and a fraud-க்கும் இதுக்கும் கிட்டத்தட்ட ஒரு மாதிரி இருக்குன்னு நினைக்காதீங்க. That is totally different. Concealment is something different. Whereas misrepresentation is making a misstatement as to a particular fact which is material to a contract. எப்படி சொல்லலாம்? You are positively asserting something to be correct, right? Which is not to be true. கிட்டத்தட்ட fraudக்கும் இதுக்கு ஒரே மாதிரி இருக்கும். Don't get confused, right? You are believing it to be true. Now the other party has got a duty to represent before you, saying that this is not as if you believe it to be true. நீங்க நினைச்சிட்டு இருக்கிற மாதிரி இது வந்து உண்மையான விஷயம் கிடையாது. Now you are being misled by the party. How you are misled? What is the duty he has got? He has got the duty to represent it by way of a specific statement. What, although you are trying to term it as a true, it is otherwise not to be true. I am believing it as a true. அவ்வளவுதான், ரைட்? அது உண்மை இல்லை அப்படிங்கிற விஷயத்தை சொல்லாம that person is also misrepresenting before you a fact. What is the fact misrepresented? He is now indulging in an act of breach of duty. What is the duty he is having? He is having every duty to represent a proper material fact, but he has breached his duty by not representing a proper material fact. Rather, he is now misrepresenting a particular fact before you, right? And putting you into a more prejudicial position, taking undue, or rather I can say taking a gainful advantage of your position, right? You are so innocent to that extent, right? So whatever is cast as a misrepresented before you, you believe it to be a true, right? So illada onna irukkrada unwarrantedly he is making some statement, right? At the time of entering into a contract, say for example, a statement is said. Now B is telling to one person C that I am the director of a company, right? Now B is putting across such a statement while executing a contract with C, projecting himself, or rather misrepresenting himself to be the director, right? Now what happens at a later point of time? Now B had made C to believe such a statement as a statement of a true nature. At a later point of time, now C come to know from somebody else that I am not the director. Now what I have done here, I have deceived, rather I have misrepresented a material fact in so far as C concerned, right? Illada onna irukkrada solradhu, which is not to be a true, I am making or I am informing it to be a true one. When at a later point of time a person comes to know, then the contract could be vitiated on the ground of misrepresentation of a material fact where I have committed a breach of duty from my part to disclose something to be true, right? So suppression of a material fact, this is the underlining factor. What is to be taken? A mistake, or rather I can say it is the suppression of a material, vital material fact is the particular aspect which have to be dealt under misrepresentation. Now coming to the voidability of the agreements without a free consent, right? Appo free consent illama edavadhu section 19, right? Fraud or misrepresentation or illa free consent illama edavadhu oru agreement or contract potrundu, that contract is now to be considered to be, what is the status of the contract அப்படினா it is voidable nature, right? So voidable எப்போ அப்படிங்கறத section 19 ல கொடுக்கறாங்க. எடுத்த உடனே void ab initio னு சொல்ல மாட்டோம். It is voidable. When it is voidable? Only at the option of the party who chooses or who consented to such a contract to make it otherwise as the vitiating factor. அப்ப நானா போய் கோர்ட்ல at my option, at my opinion, I am just going before a court and I am filing a case instituting a case constituting the entire cause of action which has made me to get the contract vitiated. எதனால நான் இந்த மாதிரி fraudulent என்ன பண்ணிட்டாங்க, இல்ல misrepresentation அல்லது otherwise we call it as free consent இல்லாம பண்ணிட்டாங்கன்னு சொல்லி நானா போய் கோர்ட்ல cause of action ரைஸ் பண்ணாத வரைக்கும் that contract will be declared to be as a voidable one, or rather unless it is being made by me before a court of law to prove that as a void, it will be called as voidable. ஏன்னா voidable nature of contract la it must come at the instance of the party or option of the party who chooses to be prove it otherwise void, right? அப்ப நானா போய் அத throw out பண்ணல அப்படினா then that is remaining as if it is a valid contract. நான் அதை void பண்ணணும்னு சொல்லி டிக்ளேர் பண்றதுக்கு ஒரு சூட் போட்டோ இல்ல any other legal mechanism I'm just following, I'm approaching the court to declare it as a void, null and void as such, அப்படி ஒரு சூட் போட்டிருந்தேன் அப்படின்னா it is instituted or initiated at my option, right? So it is at the option of one party. Adan section 19 is all about. Now coming to the mistake which is forming part of the vitiating factor of the contract under section 20, we start with 20, 21, 22 ella அப்படியே we'll just go up to 23 வரைக்கும் totally from 20 onwards to 23. Now what is that effect as to mistake? First mistake na enna, the definition. Now section 20 does not talks about the definition part of mistake, but it says then both the parties to a contract or an agreement, they are under mistake as to a particular fact. Mistake of fact பத்தி சொல்றாங்க. எப்படி? When two parties are there and the two parties to a contract are also, right, coming forward in a mistaken fact, an erroneous opinion has been formed between these two parties, right? ரெண்டு பேருமே bilateral, this is what called as bilateral mistake. So mistake is of two types, unilateral mistake or bilateral mistake. அதுக்கப்புறம் mistake of fact and mistake of law. இங்க first எடுத்த ஒன்னையும் we talk about bilateral mistake. What is the bilateral mistake is that the effect of bilateral mistake is when parties, both the parties to a contract are of a mistaken as to a particular fact, which is essential to determine the subject matter of the contract. Now that is said to be a void contract or a void agreement as such. அப்ப ரெண்டு பேருமே ஒரு விஷயத்தை குறிச்ச வரைக்கும் mistaken factல இருக்காங்க அப்படின்னா then it is hailed to be as mistake on both the parties, then such a contract will be declared to be a void contract. அப்ப இங்க bilateral mistake, அப்ப mistake as to particular fact when both the parties. Now coming to section 21, அங்க mistake of fact பத்தி பார்த்தோம். இப்ப 21 talks about mistake or effect of mistake as to law, mistake of law. Now this says that a contract shall not be normally or ordinarily held to be as a voidable, not voidable one. Yeah, because if it is so been cast as a mistake as to any particular law which is in force in India. இதுக்கு நம்ம பாப்புலரா சொல்றது என்ன அப்படின்னா ignorantia facet excuser, ignorantia juris non excuser. Ignorance of fact is claimed to be an excuse, whereas ignorance of particular law is no excuse at all. அப்போ ignorance of fact, ஒரு fact பத்தி தெரியாம இருந்தா that can be taken it as a valid defense as an excuse in the terms of Contract Act. But if a particular law is prevailing in India, if a person comes to the court or rather a party is taking advantage saying that I am ignorant of a particular provision of law, I am not aware of such a law அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்களா, right? No, that is the position which is discussed under section 21. Now contract is not voidable because it was caused by mistake as to any law in force in India, but a mistake as to law not in force in India has the same effect as the mistake of fact. அப்படின்னா என்ன, இந்தியால ஒரு லா இருக்கிறதே எனக்கு தெரியாது அப்படின்னு நான் போய் சொல்றேன், I am ignorant of that particular law, ஆனா அப்படி ஒரு law இருக்கு, I am not aware of that law, then that cannot be claimed as a factor to declare the contract as a valid contract. Now contract will become automatically a void contract or voidable at the instance of me going and telling that I do not know the law. Aduve, if it is a mistake as to law is with regard to some other law which is not at all in force in India, இந்தியால நடைமுறையில் அமலில் இல்லாத ஒரு சட்டத்தை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் நான் வந்து மிஸ்டேக் ஆஃப் லா கிளைம் பண்ண வேண்டிய அவசியம் கிடையாது. எந்த சட்டம் நடைமுறையில இருக்கிறதோ இருக்கக்கூடிய சட்டத்தை பத்தி தான் எனக்கு தெரியாம இருக்குது அப்படின்னா then contract can be held to be as a void contract. அப்ப நடைமுறையில் அமலிலே இல்லாத ஒரு சட்டத்தை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் நான் போய் அது எனக்கு தெரியாதுன்னு சொல்ல வேண்டிய அவசியம் கிடையாது, right? That is the effect of section 21 as to mistake as to a particular law is concerned. This is 21. Now coming to a mistake of a party who is taken as a mistaken identity, or section 22 talks about mistake of identity of parties, or one party is mistaking the other party as somebody else. If say A is entering into a contract with B, now A request B that he will be delivering his goods or whatever as promised through his servant. Now what B deem it or considers it that he mistakes A, or rather he mistakes instead of A that C is A. ஒரு பார்ட்டிக்கு பதிலா இன்னொருத்தனை தான் அவன்னு சொல்லி மிஸ்டேக்கன் ஐடென்டிட்டி, ரைட்? A famous case law is there. The case law is Hundy versus Lindsay, right? ரெண்டு கம்பெனிஸ் இங்க இன்வால்வ் ஆயிருக்கும். This is a very very leading case law. Hundy, CUNDY, Hundy versus Lindsay, LINDSAY, right? Lindsay. என்ன அப்படின்னா, there are two different firms, companies. One is by name Blankiran and Company இருக்கும். அதுல என்ன பண்றான், one fraudulent person by name Blankiran and Company, ஒரு வேர்டு தான் மாறுது, கிட்டத்தட்ட ஒரே மாதிரி identical words they are used, right? He approached the fake company, they approached the plaintiff and they gave some huge orders by making a written order of contract to deliver some goods, right? They fraudulently, or rather they made some orders in the name of that Blankiran and Company, which is the real company. Now what happened, this particular person, the plaintiff company, believing that particular company as that Blankiran and Company original, and the company தான் நினைச்சிட்டு goods எல்லாம் எடுத்துட்டு போய் now they have delivered it to that company which has not placed an order, right? வேற யாரோ ஒரு இண்டிவிஜுவல் ஃபேக்சுவலா ஃபால்ஸா மிஸ்ரெப்ரசன்ட் பண்ணி அல்லது பொய்யான ஒரு ஃபேக்ட் சொல்லி இவங்க தான் அவங்க நினைச்சிட்டு இவன் என்ன பண்ணிடுறான், this person has gone to the real person, the correct person, and deliver the goods, right? They have mistaken as to the identity of the party. இவங்க தான் அவங்க நினைச்சிட்டு they have just executed the contract. Now what is the effect or repercussion of this particular contract as such? Now mistake as to identity in a more fraudulent way. This is what held by the court. Now the court has held that though there is no contractual relationship between the company which they believe to be, அவங்க தான் இவங்க நினைச்சு எந்த கம்பெனிகிட்ட போய் கான்ட்ராக்ட் வச்சாங்களோ அந்த கம்பெனிக்கு இவங்களுக்கு எந்த கான்ட்ராக்சுவல் ரிலேஷன்ஷிப்பும் கிடையாது, ரைட்? So it is a clear mistake as to the identity of persons. ரெண்டு நபர்களுக்கு இடையே ஏற்படக்கூடிய அடையாளத்தில் ஏற்பட்ட குளறுபடியினால் நடைபெற்ற இது. அதனால this is hailed to be this particular mistake is hailed to be a valid contract. என்னது, it is not a voidable one. இது voidable சொல்ல முடியாது, ஏன்னா யாருமே privity of contract கிடையாது இவங்க ரெண்டு பேருக்கும். சம்பந்தமே இல்லாத ஒரு ஆளை இவன் தான் நினைச்சு போய் இவங்க இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்ட் எக்ஸிக்யூட் பண்ணா, then that contract cannot be hailed to be a voidable one merely because it is so been cast as to a mistaken identity of the parties. So this is how mistake of law and mistake of fact as such, mistaken identity, all these things are being categorized under contract as vitiating factors. So coercion, undue influence, misrepresentation, everything is there. Now the last element, the most vital element, as we say under the formula as such, L, the last factor, the lawful part of the contract or the lawful object or lawful purpose, that is now to be taken into consideration under section 23. Now what consideration and what objects are hailed to be a lawful object? அப்போ எல்லா ஆப்ஜெக்டும் எல்லா கன்சிடரேஷனையும் லாஃபுல்லா சொல்ல முடியாது. certain object or certain consideration can be hailed to be unlawful also. எப்படி? Now contract can be executed only based on a purpose of a lawful purpose or a lawful contract or lawful consideration. அன்லாஃபுல்லாவோ immoral அல்லது illegal purposeக்காக போடக்கூடிய contract அல்லது an object which is being placed in an unlawful way or an illegal manner, that is not hailed to be a legal consideration or a legal object. So now section 23 says a contract is said to be, or a consideration is said to be a lawful one when it should not be forbidden by any law. சட்டத்தால புறக்கணிக்கப்படாம இருக்கணும் ஒரு கன்சிடரேஷன். அப்படி இருந்தா மட்டும்தான் அதை லாஃபுல் கன்சிடரேஷனாவோ, அப்படி இருந்தா மட்டும்தான் அதை லாஃபுல் ஆப்ஜெக்டாவோ நம்ம எடுத்துக்க முடியும். திஸ் இஸ் ஒன். நெக்ஸ்ட் ஒன், Now, such nature of consideration or object should not defeat any particular provision of law, or it must not be a fraudulent one. ஏதாவது ஒரு சட்டத்திற்கு புறம்பாக அது இருக்கக்கூடாது. ரைட். It should not defeat the purpose of law. சட்டத்தின் நோக்கங்களை முறியடிக்கும் வகையில் அந்த ஒரு ஆப்ஜெக்ட் இருக்கக்கூடாது. I'll give you examples. It should not be a fraudulent one also. Next, it should not cause injury to any person or a property otherwise. Right. So it should not cause any injury na மத்தவங்களுக்கு எந்த வகையிலும் தீமை விளைவிக்கிற வகையில இருக்கக்கூடாது. Right. So these are all hailed to be the lawful consideration or lawful object. அப்படின்னா என்ன? Whatever you are now entering into a contract, the contract must be executed for a lawful purpose or a lawful object. அப்படின்னா otherwise this should not be hailed to be unlawful. Say for example, for the purpose of doing an unlawful act, right, for committing some terrorist activities or for committing some kind of a unlawful or illegal immoral purposes, now the பின்னாடி திருப்பி பார்ப்போம். அதுல அந்த மாதிரி பர்பஸ்க்காக ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்ட போடுறீங்க அப்படின்னா it will per se become void ab initio, because your object to the contract itself is not a clean, it is not a lawful object otherwise, right? So whatever is your object must be of a lawful in nature. இப்ப சட்டத்திற்கு கீழே அத சட்டத்திற்கு புறமானது என்று குறிப்பிடாமல் இருக்க வேண்டும். ரைட். அப்ப சட்டத்துக்கு கீழ் புறம்பாக அப்படி சொல்றாங்கன்னா, now you are going to defeat the very object of the law, whatever is there, which is being provided under the statute. Right. அப்போ இந்த மாதிரியான பர்பஸ்க்காக அன்லாஃபுல் பர்பஸ்க்கு, இம்மாரல் பர்பஸ்க்கு அல்லது இல்லீகல் பர்பஸ்க்கு எந்த விதமான கான்ட்ராக்டையோ இல்ல கன்சிடரேஷனோ கொடுத்தா that is hailed to be unlawful agreements. Right. So such an agreement could be simply void. Right. By one simple stroke we call that as an unlawful agreement. So certain considerations or certain objects must be lawful only if it is not against the law as such. Right. Now coming to the consideration part, or rather I can say what agreements are void if consideration and objects are unlawful in nature. இப்ப கன்சிடரேஷனே அன்லாஃபுல்லா இருக்கு, இப்ப கன்சிடரேஷனே வந்து இல்லீகலா இருக்கு அப்படின்னா என்ன மாதிரி எக்ஸாம்பிள் கொடுக்கலாம்? ரைட். சே ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள், you are permitted to do something in terms of public interest or in the protection of the interest of the public at large. If you are doing something, law is forbidding that particular act. Right. If you are making some agreement to defeat the interest of the public policy or defeat the interest of the public interest at large. Now, say for example, you are entering into a contract to conduct an immoral trade or an illegal drug trafficking or illicit liquor trade. இந்த மாதிரி எல்லாம் இருக்கு. Now the act itself, say for example, there is a particular act, right? Prohibition and Excise Act, all those things are there. Now it prohibits such particular act as a illegal one. Now what you are doing, you are entering into such kind of a illegal trade which is forbidden by law. You are entering upon to such an object with an unlawful consideration or an illegal consideration. Now your agreement or your contract per se, whatever you are executed, the object of such a contract is merely held to be void immediately because your entire act is held to be unlawful in law. அப்ப சட்டத்தால் எதெல்லாம் வந்து இல்லீகல்னு சொல்லி இருக்காங்களோ அது எல்லாமே totally hailed to be an unlawful agreement, which is once again as hailed to be void. சரியா? So this is one particular aspect. Right. Say for example, you are transferring some property with a fraudulent way. You are prohibited, some transactions so been prohibited under a Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. Right. You are making such kind of a transaction to other party which has been prohibited by way of an order, prohibitory or injunctory order under FERA or FEMA as such. Now you are doing that illegally or unlawfully. This is so been hailed as a illegal act. Right. So ஒரு சட்டத்திற்கு கீழ் செய்யக்கூடாதுன்னு ஏதாவது ஒரு விஷயங்களை சொல்லி இருக்கும் பொழுது அதை மீறி நம்ம அதை செய்யறோம், அதுக்காக கான்ட்ராக்ட் எக்ஸிக்யூட் பண்றோம், அதை வச்சு எதாவது பண்றோம்னா then it is squarely coming under the ambit of section 24 as such. right? This have to be taken into. You should not defeat the provisions of law as such, right? That is the provision under section 24. Right. Now, there are certain other provisions which you can just look into. Section 25 is very simple. An agreement or a contract without consideration, it is a void contract. Meaning section 2D a contract without consideration is a void contract. Yeah, it cannot be executed. No contract will arise out of a fair promise. Ex nudum pactum non oritur actio. So contract without consideration is nullity or it is void in the eye of law. That's 25. If a contract is so been barred, namely, say for example, a time barred debt, right? You are doing something, you are entering into an agreement, you are making a promise to pay a time barred debt, which is barred by limitation, law of limitation, right? Some promissory notice has been executed, right? Now that is not being paid. You are giving some kind of a assurance, or you are making a promise to pay such a time barred debt, because the promissory note, the validity to institute a cause of action within 3 years, you know that. So it has been time barred, right? So அது முடிஞ்சு போச்சு, காலம் கடந்து போச்சு, கால வரையறையால அதை வந்து ப்ராமிஸ் பண்ணி அதை செஞ்சு கொடுக்குறேன்னு சொல்லி ஒரு அக்ரிமெண்ட்டோ கான்ட்ராக்டோ போட்டீங்க அப்படின்னா, then it is been totally a void one, because it has been barred by law. Right? This is one part of it. Now 26, agreement in restraint of a marriage, it is a void. Say for example, it is any person who is entering into an agreement between the other party. What is the agreement? Now here the illustration is very particular. You can just refer to illustration under section 26. A person entering into agreement with other person to marry a minor child, avangaloda minor child marriage பண்ணிக்கறாங்க, right? Or on failure to marry, now he has to pay a penalty, right? First of all, an agreement of this kind in restraint of a marriage, right? இந்த மாதிரியான மேரேஜ் பண்ண முடியுமா? பண்ண முடியாது. Minor's marriage is not a valid one. You are restraining that particular thing, and you are doing so, you are restraining the freedom, or rather under public policy, you are making an agreement which is not being held to be a valid one. Now you are making a particular statement that you will be going to marry a minor girl. Now law prohibits such kind of an act to be performed. Now it is to be construed as whatever agreement you are making, it is in the restraint of a valid marriage, right? So you are doing so purposefully in a more restrictive sense, that it is not at all possible for you to enter into such a contract, but you are restraining something. Seri, idile unor example kudukranga. Now the illustration number 2. Yeah, for example, the first wife of a person, she gave permission to her husband to go for a second marriage, right? இது வந்து வேலிட் ஆகுமா? first wife permit பண்ணிட்டா without dissolving the first marriage. I am being permitted by somebody, my wife, to marry somebody as second marriage without annulling my earlier marriage. பண்ண முடியுமா? முடியாது. Now the court says that, or rather the law under section 26 is very particular, that such type of a marriage or going for a second marriage during the lifetime of a female is prohibited under law. Now if you are restraining or you are making such kind of a marriage in restraint of a legal provision, you are circumventing, you are overlooking a legal provision, and if you are capable of doing such particular act without obtaining a proper legal divorce or an annulment of marriage as such, right? Even if your first wife has given consent to it, now that kind of an agreement cannot be held to be a lawful agreement. So that kind of an agreement is held to be void agreement, right? So there are case laws also. You can just refer to those cases, right? So now coming to an agreement in restraint of a trade, some business activities or some trade is so being entered between people. You are making an agreement. By virtue of that agreement, now what you are doing, because right to freedom of trade and commerce is protected by a constitution, you all know, 19(1)(z). You cannot take away the right of a person having such a freedom to trade or conduct a business or a commerce as such. Now, what you are doing, the principle of this particular section under section 27, agreement in restraint of trade, is a void agreement. Yeah. Now you are doing some trade, you are making some business activities, depriving somebody against public policy. Now, whatever trade activity you are doing, so long as you are in such a trade activity, it must be strictly within the public policy, right? Public policy against you are going, right, and doing some business, or you are entering into trade, you are entering into a agreement per se. Now, that agreement in principle is held to be a void agreement, right? So, agreement in restraint of a trade activity is void, right? Or rather, I am making an agreement to stop a person from doing some trade. I am restricting a person's activity from doing a trade. I am taking away the goodwill of a such person, right? அவர் ஒரு வணிகம் நடத்திட்டு வர்றாரு, அவருக்கு அவப்பெயர் நடத்துற மாதிரியோ அவப்பெயர் வர மாதிரியோ இல்ல அவரோட குட்வில்லுக்கு நற்பெயருக்கு களங்கம் விளைவிக்கிற மாதிரியோ அவரோட ட்ரேட் ஆக்டிவிட்டிஸை ரெஸ்ட்ரிக்ட் பண்ற மாதிரி ஏதாவது அக்ரிமெண்ட் போடுறான் யாரு கூடவாதும், ரைட்? ஸோ நவ் தட் கைண்ட் ஆஃப் அன் அக்ரிமெண்ட் is, or rather I am making carrying on the very same similar business with somebody else so as to cause some kind of a negative repercussion on the goodwill of such person, right? அந்த மாதிரி எல்லாம் பண்றது competing, right? So this kind of competition law has come into place now, right? This kind of a competitive practice cannot be hailed to be, or restraining the trade activity cannot be hailed to be a valid one. It is once again hailed to be a void one under section 27. Sorry. 28 is very, very particular. Agreement in restraint of the legal proceedings. This is very, very important. See, to defeat or to enforce or to prevent a person from absolutely enforcing his rights in a court of law, right? So an agreement purportedly executed by me so as to oust the jurisdiction of the court, it is illegal. Why? Because once again it is against a public policy. Seri, na agreement onu potu I am entering and incorporating an agreement with a clause saying that neither of the parties to this agreement, either offerer or offeree, shall have any right to enforce the agreement by any legal proceedings. இந்த கான்ட்ராக்ட்ல தான் பிரச்சனை வந்துச்சுன்னா நம்ம ரெண்டு பேரும் இதை கோர்ட்ல போய் என்ஃபோர்ஸ் பண்ணிக்க கூடாது, இது லீகல் ப்ரொசீடிங்ஸ்க்கு ரிசார்ட் பண்ணிக்க கூடாது. We shall not resort ourselves to approach a court of law and enforce our legal rights before a court of law. அப்படின்னு லீகல் ப்ரொசீடிங்ஸை பண்ணக்கூடாதுன்னு சொல்லி ரெஸ்ட்ரிக்ட் பண்ண முடியுமா? Because I am restricting or I am preventing a person from enforcing his legal right to go before a court of law, right? So I am making a person to extinguish away such a right, or rather I am disabling him from approaching the court in event of breach in the contract. இந்த கான்ட்ராக்ட்ல ஏதாவது பிரீச் ஏற்பட்டுச்சு அப்படின்னா நாம ரெண்டு பேரும் இதுக்கு கோர்ட்டுக்கு போய் எந்த ப்ரொசீடிங்ஸும் போட்டுக்க கூடாது அப்படின்னு சொல்லி அக்ரிமெண்ட்ல ஒரு கிளாஸ் வைக்க முடியுமா? நோ. Rather, if you are going to do so, then it is against, totally against, or you are refraining, your act per se renders it to be void. Namely, it is absolutely preventing a person from executing or enforcing his legal rights. அப்ப கான்ட்ராக்சுவல் ஆப்ளிகேஷன்ல பிரீச் வரும்போது பிரீச் ஆஃப் கான்ட்ராக்டுக்கு ஒருத்தரோட ரைட்டை வந்து என்ஃபோர்ஸ் பண்ணக்கூடாது அப்படின்னு சொல்லி ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்டை போட முடியுமானா போட முடியாது. That is section 28, right? So certain exceptions are there. Exception is that நான் கோர்ட்டுக்கு போக மாட்டேன், ஆனா we will resolve it amicably by invoking an arbitration clause. So you can make it, right? நான் கோர்ட்டுக்கு போக மாட்டேன், I will go for an alternate dispute resolution, right? So invoking, submitting in terms of reference to an arbitrator, that is permissible, right? But you cannot restrict a person totally. A blanket ban cannot be stipulated by you by restricting the entire party, the one party, to entirely enforce his legal remedies. அப்படி பண்ண முடியாது. That is right. So if you are able to do so, you can make an amicable arbitration or you can settle it out of court. அதெல்லாம் பண்ணலாம், right? So there is no restriction or restraint as such, right? கோர்ட்டுக்கு போக மாட்டேங்கிறது வேற, but settling the dispute amicably through an arbitration clause is permissible under section 28 is concerned, right? Uncertain agreements அடுத்தது 29ல. This is very very important, right? What is an uncertain contract? Section 29, right? Now these are all very particular. These agreements are all totally void in nature. The agreements of uncertainty, it may be happen, or it may be capable of being happening, or it may not be capable of being happening. இதை எப்படி எடுத்துக்கலாம்னா, these are termed as contingent contract, happening or non-happening of a specified certain or an uncertain event. Contingent, நடக்கலாம் அல்லது நடக்காமல் கூட போகலாம். Contingent contract, this is the very very important aspect, important branch of a contract which we will be discussing, right? Certainty or uncertainty. Section 29 says uncertainty. Say for example, an agreement which has not been certain, and rather it has not been capable of being made certain also. Example, I can just say, illustration I am just giving you. A is now agreeing to sell to B 100 tons of oil. சரி, பொதுவா இருக்குங்க, என்ன ஆயில்னு ஸ்பெசிஃபை பண்ணல. What is that? Is it a crude oil? Illa, what is that? Any particular specific nature is not being mentioned. The simpliciter says it is uncertain in nature. A agrees to sell to B 100 tons of oil. There was nothing prima facie to show or to state materially what is the quality or what is the nature of the oil, or what kind of the oil that was being intended to be sold. இதுதான் எக்ஸாம்பிள் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க. அப்ப இதை குறித்து, ஒப்பந்தத்தை குறித்து உறுதியான முறையில் என்னன்னு சொல்லி பிக்ஸ் பண்ணாமையே விட்டுட்டு, the terms are not so being perfectly fixed, or the terms are not so being particularly entered upon between the parties. The agreement is not certain or clear as to what is the subject matter, as to the specified description, right? What is the subject matter of the article which is so been involved, right? There is no indication at all as to the purported meaning of the transaction or the words used in the contract. It is very ambiguous or uncertain in nature. What is the validity of such kind of a uncertain contracts? Now law says, section 29 particularly says, such type of a contract of an uncertain clause cannot be executed. So agreements are void for their uncertainty. இந்த மாதிரி certain terms இல்லாம uncertain எந்த விதமான ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்டையும் ஏற்படுத்தி கொள்ள முடியாது, right? This is very very particular, uncertain agreements. Now coming to section 30. Now 30 has got a particular relationship in contingent contract, the contract which is so being termed as a wagering contract, right? இதுதான் முக்கியம். Wagering agreement or a wagering contract. Wagerனா என்ன? An agreement which is termed in nature of a bet or an event where there is some kind of a high probability or an impossibility is there, right? It is so in the nature of a wagering contract. அப்படின்னா என்ன? Agreements which is executed or enforced by way of wager or void. Yeah, the reason being very simple. You cannot interest, you cannot commit any person to enter in such kind of a wager. ஏன்னா அதெல்லாம் என்ன மாதிரியான நேச்சர்ல இருக்கும்னா, wagering-னா a bet, right? It may happen or it may not happen, right? A person who is saying that if you win in this particular race, I will be in a position to enforce the contract in your favor. இப்படி போட முடியுமா? You cannot contribute or you cannot subscribe such kind of a contract by saying or making some kind of a happening or a non-happening of a specified event. It may happen. இதுதான் doctrine of supervening impossibility, right? It is a game of a chance. Either it may be a game of a gain or lose or loss. It is a mutual chances. அப்ப mutual chances இருக்கிறதுல it is a nature of wager. This wager requires that it is totally a void one. அப்போ இந்த மாதிரியான விஷயத்துக்கெல்லாம் கான்ட்ராக்ட போட முடியாது. ஸ்பெகுலேட்டிவ் இன் நேச்சர், ஐ கேன் புட் இட் வெரி பர்டிகுலர்லி. The contract based on mere speculation or a contract which is to be happen on a uncertain speculative event cannot be executed by the parties. As such, they are termed to be wagering nature as a void agreements or a void contracts. So this is one ambit or one part of the void contract as such. சரி, இதுல certain exceptions எல்லாம் இருக்கு. என்னென்னலாம்? இந்த ஹார்ஸ் ரேஸ் இதெல்லாம் இது கீழே வருமா வேஜரிங்க்கு, ரைட்? ஸோ நவ் இட் இஸ் அன் எக்ஸெப்ஷன். அதுலயே கொடுத்துருக்காங்க செக்ஷன் 13லயே. செக்ஷன் 30ல கீழே பார்த்தீங்கன்னா எக்ஸெப்ஷன் இன் ஃபேவர் ஆஃப் த பிரைஸ் அமௌண்ட் ரிசீவ்ட் பை எ பர்சன் பை ஹார்ஸ் ரேசிங். அப்போ குதிரை பந்தயத்துக்கு குதிரை மேல காசு கட்டுறது, and that is so been happening everywhere, right? Horse racing, right? So it does not subscribe to in the nature of a wagering contract. Certain competitions, puzzle, crossword competitions, right? Sometimes lottery, right? So these are all not forming part of the wagering nature of contract, right? If the person is so being able to prove that these competitions are played with the skillful nature, not merely as a game of chance, but it do involve certain element of skill. அப்போ அறிவின் அடிப்படையில அறிவை பயன்படுத்தி you are applying your skill, application of skill to a particular game, or you are making some plausible effort to apply your skill. அந்த மாதிரி இருக்கிறதுலாம் you cannot make that, or you cannot per se term that to be as a contract which is hailed to be a wagering contract. So அதெல்லாம் wagering contract கீழ நார்மலா we cannot term it as, right? So this aspect have to be dealt insofar as the wagering nature of contract, right? Now the other in respect of contingent contract, that is so been particularly defined under section 31. So 31ல தான் இந்த contingent contractங்கறத சொல்றோம். அப்ப something if it is happening or some event on a future date or a collateral event which will be taking part on any future event. அப்ப future eventல நடக்கக்கூடியது, if that future event is happened, then contract is said to be executed or enforced. If future event is not being plausibly capable of perform, or it doesn't happen, அப்படின்னா the contract becomes void in the event that it is an impossible or supervening impossibility. Section 31 and 32. 31, an example is there. Say for example, A is contracting with B. What is the contract? A agrees to pay B a sum of 10,000. What is the contingency? What is the happening of that impossible event or a supervening impossible event? If B's house is burnt, right? B ஓட வீடு நெருப்புல தீ பிடிச்சி எரிஞ்சிருச்சு அப்படின்னா, now A will be in a position to pay B a sum of 10,000. இது நடக்குமா நடக்காதா? நிகழலாம் அல்லது நிகழாமலையும் போகலாம், right? It may happen or it may not happen. What is the contingency? What is the condition precedent? The condition precedent being, if as promised or as contracted by A, if B's house is caught into fire and burnt, then the contract is said to be happen as per section 32. You can enforce the contract on the contingency of that event being happening. அதான் சொன்னேன், and supervening impossibility. If it is possibly happen on an event which is deemed to be impossible, நடக்கவே நடக்காதுன்னு நம்ம நினைச்சிட்டு இருப்போம், right? On a future date it is so being happen, then the contract is to be enforced on such a happening of the particular event which is being happen on a future date. So wherever you are relying on something, and if something is not happening, then the contract is not said to be enforced. Only on that event of contract being happened, then this particular event becomes a possible event. If it doesn't happen, it becomes a impossible event. Doctrine of supervening impossibility. So it is a supervening act which is not being happen as the contingency. Either it may happen or it may not happen, right? So this is one particular provision which we have to take into consideration when we talk about the contingent contract as such, right? So out of section, there are totally 75 sections altogether in contracts. Now we have up to covered up to some 31 sections, right?